remember hearing, I guess a few years ago, perhaps whenever he passed away, about the work ethic of Kobe Bryant. It was quite spectacular. So this man won 5 NBA championships. He was a 2-time NBA Finals MVP. He was an 18-time All-Star, 4-time All-Star MVP. And to be able to accomplish this, he obviously had at least a little bit of natural talent, but he had an incredible work ethic. There were some stories floating around whenever he died a couple of years ago about this, and here are just a few of the highlights. So in high school, he would show up 5 a.m. to start practicing before school. He practiced for 2 hours before school. When he made it to the NBA at the ripe old age of 18, he would show up 2 hours before practice and shoot before they had their practice. He was always the first person there. In fact, there was a story of one of his teammates who was excited whenever Kobe had broken his wrist, because he said, well, finally I'll be able to beat him to practice. And when he showed up early to practice, Kobe was already there with a cast on his right hand, shooting with his left hand, already practicing. Whenever he was on Team USA, he would show up at 4:15 in the morning and work out until 11, and he wouldn't leave until he made 800 shots. I played basketball several years growing up. I've shot around a little bit since then. I even played some basketball on Nintendo. And I think I've never made 800 shots in my life, if you include all of those. And he would make 800 shots every single day. There are a lot of other little tidbits that were on this thing that I found, but that sort of gets the point across. So why did he do this? Well, he did this to accomplish the things that I mentioned at the beginning. He did it because he wanted to be great. Right? He wanted to win championships. He wanted to be the best. And although we can argue about whether or not he wasn't, he was at least close. So he did this for basketball, right? He did this for basketball. How much more should we be willing to put forth some effort for eternal glory? This is what Jesus is getting at in the opening of the gospel. He says, I have come to set the earth on fire, and how I wish it were already blazing. How I wish it were already blazing. That we have examples in the church, amazing examples in the church, of people who were on fire for love of God. Right? These are the people that we call the saints. You have saints like St. Catherine, who wanted to be a religious, but her parents wouldn't let her. And so rather than just saying, oh, my mom and dad won't let me, I'm going to cry about it and not do anything, she became a saint at her house. She said that she developed this little cell in her heart that she would go into to pray, since she couldn't have a cell in a monastery. And that is where she became holy. And she ended up doing amazing things, even getting the Holy Father to move back from his vacation in France to Italy. You have saints like St. Thomas Aquinas, who wrote volumes and volumes and volumes of works on theology, and he was able to do this because of his intense life of prayer. He would always pray before he started his writing. There's one story about how he shows up for a debate, not knowing that he was the one to debate this master. And rather than getting to work on reading and kind of getting his thoughts together, he first went and spent an hour in the chapel so that he could then be prepared to get to work. And then lastly, we could say many things about many saints, but the last one I'll mention is St. John Vianney, since we celebrated his feast day just a couple of weeks ago. St. John Vianney was a tireless worker in the vineyard of the Lord. He heard confessions towards the end of his life between 16 and 18 hours a day. Between 16 and 18 hours a day, he was in the confessional hearing confession. That's what being on fire with the love of God looks like. Right? Being willing to do the things that need to be done in order to strive for holiness. And these are wonderful examples, but one of the problems with the saints that we can run into is that we can convince ourselves that this is just something that was done in the past. Right? Well, of course, St. Thomas did this in the glory days of the Middle Ages. Right? Of course, St. Catherine did this with the turmoil in the papacy. She was raised up for this, of course. Of course, St. John Vianney, right, was able to do this because everything was so great for him in post-revolution France, right? But this is not just something that is done in the past. It's something that's continuing to happen today, right? And I have examples in my own life of holy people that have inspired me, right? One, perhaps the most, is Monsignor Mouton. Monsignor Mouton passed away, I think, about 5 years ago. And his last year was my first year at Cathedral. And so I got to sit across from him every day at lunch for a year and just soak in his wisdom. I remember when I first got to Cathedral, I told the cook, I said, man, I'm so excited to sit across from Monsignor every day and have lunch with him. And she said, it's going to get old. But it didn't, right? It was wonderful to sit across from him and to be able to get a little glimpse into his life. Now, this man would wake up every day at midnight to pray. He would start his day at midnight. He used to start his day at 3, but then when he moved to Cathedral, there was another priest there who would be in the hall at the same time, and he didn't want to have to see him. So he started his day at midnight, right around this time. Right? He would wake up, go to the chapel, and pray, and then go on about his business. He was a man of incredible discipline. You could set your clock by him. He would just have his day set out, and he would not waver from it. One of the most impressive memories I have of that is he was walking down the hall one day to go hear confessions, and someone said, "Oh, Monsignor, I saw you have a piece of mail in your little mailbox." And he said, "Well, thank you. I'll get it tomorrow. I've already checked my mail today." It may not seem like a big deal, but he was so set on his schedule, he was not going to let anything get him off of that. He had the earliest Mass of the day, every single day at Cathedral. Even after he was no longer, he was just a priest in residence. I can't say retired because he would haunt me from the grave because he hated that word. But he would always take the earliest Mass every day, even on his day off. Before he went and did whatever he did on his day off, he would always have 6:30 Mass. Even after, again, he was simply a priest in residence, he would go over once a week to the cathedral school, and he would go to, I forget which class it was, maybe second grade, and he would hear their catechism. He would assign them questions, and then he would go and call on them, and they would have to recite it to him. Every single week. I don't want to bore you too much, but one last thing that is impressive for me is he would, after he had prayed his holy hour at midnight, he would go walk around the cathedral center for his exercise, and he would sing as he did it so that he could keep his voice in shape so he could continue to say Mass. This is what it looks like to be on fire with love for the Lord, and to arrange your life in a way that shows this. Right? We have other examples that I get to see on a regular basis. I get to see students come in and out of this place constantly. And even though they are in school full time, and many of them have jobs and even are sort of normal and have social lives, they're still praying a holy hour every day, and going to Mass every day, and saying a rosary every day, and praying the Liturgy of the Hours, and volunteering. It's incredible, because they have tasted, right? They have been set on fire by the divine flame, and they can't help but live their lives to try to receive more of it. Now, what is it that motivated the saints? What is it that motivated Monsignor? What is it that motivates the students who carry out these things? I was reading a little talk that I heard years ago from a cardinal in Toronto, Cardinal Collins. This is what he said. He said, "Our hearts must be set on the fiery, dazzling beauty of our true home, the heavenly Jerusalem." In order for us to be set on fire, right, we have to know what the end is. We have to know where we're going. And our goal is heaven, our true home. And if we don't have that in mind, then we're not going to go through the great efforts that I mentioned some of these people go through to have that relationship with Christ. Right? We need to know that the goal is worth it. Just like Kobe knew that he wanted to be a champion, and so he was willing to do everything he needed to do to be able to get there. We have to know that our goal is worth it so that we are willing to sacrifice and work hard to get there. Right? How do we do this? How do we set our hearts on our true home, on the heavenly Jerusalem? Well, we have to come into contact with the fire of God's love. Right? We have to recognize his love, and we have to foster that love in our lives. And so I'm going to tell you some very creative ways to do this. First of all, we have to be baptized. When we're baptized, we receive the fire of God's love in our soul. Right? This is even shown in the baptismal rite because we receive a baptismal candle. It's handed to our parents or godparents, and it's lit from the paschal candle, showing that the light of Christ is now in us. That we are now on fire for God. And as long as we don't commit serious sin, that fire remains. And so the rest of our life is a fostering, a fanning into a flame, this fire that was put in us at baptism. I'm going to tell you three very interesting and creative and new ways that you've never heard of before to be able to do this. Ready? Go to Mass, go to confession, and pray. Blowing your mind right now, right? Go to Mass, go to confession, and pray. And it may seem like I talk about these things a lot, and that's because I do. And I talk about them a lot because they're important. And if we're not doing these, then we don't even have a foundation to build on, much less are we able to be on fire for the Lord. And so, and part of this, I'll admit, is coming up because I've not been praying very well lately, and I needed to be fussed at. And if I need to be fussed at, well, then you're going to get fussed at too. All right? So, we need to do some soul searching, right? And we need to take a little inventory and see how we're doing on these things, right? Am I on fire for God? Think about how easily we give up on these commitments that we've made that we know we ought to do, that the church demands of us whenever things get a little tough. So I'll go through those three things and, see about it. So, first of all, think about how easily we can sometimes miss Mass. How easily we miss Mass because of other obligations, because there are other things more important than worshiping the one God. Right? What are some of those things that we convince ourselves are more important than going to Mass? Travel ball, one of my favorite things in life. Travel ball. Because my kid is going to play professional sports one day, and they need to be at all of these things, and they need to play on Sunday all day long. And so there's really no possible way that we can get to Mass. It's so easy to convince ourselves of this. Right? The other one I hear so much is, I didn't go to Mass because I was on vacation. Why would we ever? Now, okay, I always have to admit whenever I preach on this, it's easy for me because I can just pack up my little Mass kit and no matter where I am, I have Mass, right? But why would I ever want to go on a vacation where I was not able to get to Mass? What in the world is so worth seeing that I'm going to miss going to Mass? I'll ruin the answer for you. It's nothing. There is nothing that important that we should miss Mass for. This one is my favorite, and I may have had this Mass in mind when I wrote this one. maybe we miss Mass because we partied too much. And we just were too hungover to get to Mass, even at 9 p.m. And going a step farther, maybe you pray very well at 9 p.m. If you do, God bless you. Keep coming to this Mass. If the only reason you come to this Mass is because you were too hungover to get to any other Mass, well, I guess still keep coming to the Mass, but evaluate your life. Stop drinking so much. Right? Again, if you come because you filled your weekend with so many other things, and you're falling asleep every time you come to Mass, but 9 o'clock's the only time you can come because you had way too many other social obligations, well, evaluate your life. Right? When I have these Masses, I'm kind of falling asleep. But I try to plan my whole weekend around having these Masses. I took a nap today and drank coffee so I could be awake to do this. So I could pray well whenever I know I need to be here. Right? Confession. How easily do we give up going to confession? Because we're afraid. Right? And that's a valid fear. Right? I'm still afraid to go to confession. Because I'm going to someone that I probably know very well. I tend to know the priests around here. And I'm telling them all of the ways that I messed up. That's not a very comfortable thing to do. But we need to go to confession. Right? Why would we stay distant from God after we offended him? We should go run up to him and apologize immediately. Right? Another one that I love is, well, I haven't been to confession, because I usually ask. If someone hasn't been to confession in 6 months or longer, I usually ask why. And one of the things I hear often is, oh, because I just didn't have the time. Didn't have the time. We live in South Louisiana. There are 16 parishes in the city limits of Lafayette. At Wisdom, that's this place, in case you didn't know, we hear 9 hours of confession a week before every single Mass. And I said this at 6, I'll say it here too, because then it'll make me do it. I was talking to Father about the possibility of both of us hearing confessions before 6 and 9, because usually I leave people in line. And so soon we're going to start doing that. So you have so many opportunities to go to confession. There's no excuse not to do it. And even outside of those times, if you want to go to confession, I wear this thing that says "bother me." It's a collar. And so if you ever see me and you want to go to confession, ask me. I'll be happy to hear your confession. I've heard confessions in interesting places. Airports, the student union, you name it. I'm happy to hear your confession. Get to confession. Make the time. It's not that you don't have the time, you're not making the time because it's not important enough. Because we're not on fire with love for God. The third one is daily prayer. How easily we give up daily prayer. Again, the most often excuse is because we don't have time. Well, I'm going to give you an example of the fire that I see in the students that maybe can help you out. So Father Pellissier does this little group on Thursday mornings at 6:30 a.m. with the men, the students. And they call it the Black Coffee Brotherhood because they drink black coffee and they're dudes. And they make this commitment that they are not to spend more time on social media than they spend praying. And so if they spend an hour praying, they only have 59 minutes on social media. And if they spend an hour praying, they probably don't want to spend 59 minutes on social media because it's dumb and they realize it. So it's not that we don't have time to pray, it's that we're wasting our time doing other things. And when I say we, I mean we, because I do the same thing. Right? Oh, I don't have time to pray today. I don't have time to read the Bible today. I don't have time to do spiritual reading. I have so many things to do. And yet, how often do I find myself scrolling on my phone, looking at silly stuff on social media? But I don't have time to read the Bible, because that's just out of the question. Right? Another reason we don't pray is because it's hard. Oh, it's too hard. I don't like it. Well, life is hard. And it gets harder as you go. So, ruin that surprise for you. Right? It's hard. But it's worth it. You think it was hard for Kobe Bryant to get up every day and practice before everybody else and win 5 championships? It's probably a little difficult. If he were here, I'm sure he wouldn't say, I only did it because it was easy. Super convenient. No, the goal was worth it. Our goal is heaven. Our goal is worth it. And so we have to make time. We have to do things that are difficult. We have to pray every single day because it's worth it. Right? So basically we have 2 options. We can do these things and more and grow closer to God now, right? Be inflamed with that fire of God's love, or we can experience flames later. And that might sound harsh, but that's the reality of it. There's no in between. There's no other option. Either we live the life that God calls us to live and we go to heaven, or we reject him and we go to hell. We don't even want to go to purgatory. Purgatory is the fires of hell, except we know that we're going to heaven. It's the same pain. It's not fun. Shoot for heaven. Right? We need to do this so that we can receive that goal that we are shooting for. And the next line of that gospel, Jesus says, "How great is my anguish until it is accomplished." How great is my pain until my baptism, my crucifixion, my death for sinners is accomplished. But also how great is his pain until the conversion of sinners happens. Until hearts are set on fire. And if we are baptized, we're other Christs. And so our pain should be great until we're on fire for the Lord and until others around us are on fire for the Lord. Right? We should be sad when we see people not living their faith on fire. And we should work to correct it. Right? We have to commit ourselves, right, to living our faith radically, to going to Mass every single Sunday, every holy day, no matter what, unless you're throwing up and you're going to get somebody else sick, then stay away. I don't want to see you. Right? Going to confession at least once a month. But if we sin seriously, getting there as quickly as we can. And praying every single day. I think 30 minutes is a minimum. I waste at least 30 minutes every single day. I guarantee you. I don't even have to think about it. I could find time to read Scripture. I could find time to pray a rosary. I could find time to do all these things. But I waste time. And I'm lazy sometimes. I'm revealing all of my secrets to you. Right? We can find 30 minutes a day to converse and be in friendship with the God of creation. We can find the time if we want to do it. Right? And as we do this, we're taking a step closer to God, who is that fire of love, right? So that we might be set on fire. And so that we might be able to attain the goal that he has set out for us.